I feel that when a store has your product in selling it, they own it.
You're listening to Thrive by Design, business, marketing, and lifestyle strategies for your jewelry brand to flourish and thrive. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Thrive by Design podcast, episode number 61. Oh my gosh, where does the time go? It's already episode number 61, and we are closing in on nearly a year of being on the air with Thrive by Design. How fun is that? It's been a totally wild ride. We've had some really wonderful guests, and I want to encourage you to kind of look back through the archive because there's some really wonderful interviews, amazing trainings. I talk a little bit about my grandfather, which is super fun, and we have great episodes. So if you're just starting to listen now, make sure that you go back and listen to some of our earliest episodes because they're all insanely amazing. So go check those out if you haven't, and make sure that you're listening while you're working or maybe at your bench, whatever you do, or driving, or as I like to do, walking around town in New York City. I got a lot of walking to do. So today we have a really wonderful guest who is my co-founder over at Flourish and Thrive Academy, Robin Kramer, and we're going to be talking all about consignment because we know this is a hot topic. People aren't sure if they should do it, or some people are doing it unsuccessfully, and while other people are doing it really well. So I know that there's a lot of confusion about it. So we want to clear some of that up. And so today we're going to talk about to consign or not to consign, because that's the question. But before we dive in today, let's take a word from our sponsor. Today's sponsor for the show is one of our favorite suppliers and one of our preferred vendors over here at Flourish and Thrive Academy, and a huge supporter of the Thrive by Design podcast. We just love them so much because they are so committed to supporting small business, and that's what we're all about, right? Especially small jewelry businesses. And that's why I'm excited to share Halstead with you, because they are such a wonderful company and so supportive of emerging brands, especially because every year they host a grant contest to the tune of $7,500. How amazing is that? They just closed submission for the 2016 grant, but you definitely want to be on their radar for next year because they are really basically just giving you free money if you have a solid business plan and you win the competition. So it's super, super cool. So if you aren't shopping at Halstead yet, make sure that you do. They are super cool and a really great wholesale supplier for all things jewelry, like chain, findings, charms, materials, and everything you really need as a professional jewelry maker. The best part about it, if you pop on over to halsteadbead.com, you can also shop not only on your tablet and your computer, but also on your phone. So it's totally mobile-friendly website, brand new website, super easy to shop. Make sure that you pop on over to halsteadbead.com and pick up your next order of findings. One more cool thing that I wanted to mention before we get back to the regular scheduled program is that if you use the discount code, all caps, FTA 2016, before October 31st, 2016, go there, buy $100 worth of product and get $10 off your order. Such a generous offer. So make sure that you pop on over to halsteadbead.com, pop in your discount code FTA 2016, get $10 off your order of $100 or more. Today, I have a very special guest with me, and I call her special because she is not on the show with me nearly enough. Guess who it is? My co-founder, Robin Kramer.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be sitting next to you, Tracy.
I know, so it's Robin and I, usually when we record together, we're recording virtually over Skype or over Zoom or something like that, and we don't ever have the chance, or very rarely do we have the chance to sit next to each other and record. So we've turned my New York City office into a recording studio, which is kind of funny because we're sitting on this tiny little couch next to each other as we record. So today, Robin, you're here in New York City right now. Tell me why.
I'm here. There's the New York Now trade show, and I am here because I love our community so much that I wanted to support our designers who are here from our community. And I also want to keep in touch with all the buyers and reps and trade show folks that I know so I can keep them in the loop for our community, really, specifically.
So we had a lot of designers at the show. So Robin, why don't you tell us some of the designers that we were hanging out with?
Oh, absolutely. So there was Ann Chicahisa from Chicahisa Studio. Wimberly Treble from Wimberly Inc.
And we've been friends with Wimberly for a long time. She's totally killing it.
Yeah. And the ladies from F is for Frank, Shoshana and Casey were there. Amy Shepsman from Flocka. Tracy Graves from Becoming. Nancy Nelson was there with her line. And Brandy from Velavita Jewelry. Oh, and Jill Schwartz, who has been in business for 30 years now.
Yeah, Jill's is a friend of ours. She has a brand called Elements Jewelry, but she came and joined us for a little after-show cocktail last night.
So, and that's just to name, oh gosh, I want to say Colleen Maurer. I mean,
yeah, Colleen Maurer. Yeah, so many.
So many designers. So it was really amazing to see all these designers showing and having a great trade show.
Yeah, awesome. So today, we love talking, I know you love talking about wholesale because that's really your thing is wholesale. And over the years, we've, wholesale is always evolving and changing. And I know when I started out in the jewelry business, like when I was in my very early 20s, people were I remember my brother was playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, and his girlfriend at the time had an aunt who had a store or gallery in Kansas City. And she's like, oh, give me some jewelry to put into my store. And I was like, okay, great. I didn't really have like a full wholesale line together yet, but I just made a bunch of jewelry and sent it there, and she had it there on consignment. So I stopped doing consignment shortly after that experience, and I'm going to tell you a little bit why about that later. But a lot of designers who have been trying to get into wholesale start with consignment, and they have a lot of consignment or sale or return stores. So we wanted to talk about to consign or not to consign today, because that is the question.
It's a very good question.
It's a good question. So Robin, I know that we both have very strong opinions about consignment, when it's good and when it's not good. So very briefly, why don't you tell me your feelings about consignment?
Well, consignment is not my favorite. I feel that...
Just be really honest, yeah, Robin.
I feel that when a store has your product in selling it, they own it. And that if you're consigning it, the actual passion and drive to sell it isn't as strong as if they own it. So the consignment to me doesn't have that backing of like, okay, we own it, we want to sell it, we want to learn more about it. I think that's my biggest concern about consignment, that it doesn't have that component of it. And also it's inventory that you own as a designer. And so...
Yeah, really great points, Robin. And, I think that like the biggest, we're going to go through this a little bit more in depth momentarily, but I think like what you said, that ownership piece is oftentimes not there when you're not with the right consignment store. And that's exactly what happened to me and the story that I wanted to share. So my brother's girlfriend at the time, when he was playing professional football, his aunt had a store in Kansas City somewhere. So I sent a bunch of stuff, naive, without a contract, just some little inventory list. I didn't even think, totally talked about what the commission split was going to be, like how much money I was going to be making off of each sale, vice versa. So, I just sat there passively waiting for a check to come, because they said they would be sending me checks every single month. 1 month went by, 2 months went by, 3 months went by. And I was like, where's my check? I needed some money to go out with my friends and go to dinner. And there was no check coming. I remember thinking, I was sitting in my apartment with my roommate at the time in Santa Monica. I was still in college. And I was like, what's going on? Like, this isn't working. So I decided very bravely at the time, which felt like a really brave thing, to pick up the phone and ask them what was going on with my jewelry. And they finally got on the phone, and my brother's girlfriend's aunt was very sweet, and she got on the phone. She's like, oh yeah, thanks so much for calling us. Yeah, let me go check on that. And she's like, the box is still in the back. We haven't put it out. Oh. And I was like, are you serious? They had the box in the back of all this inventory. And I remember thinking, like, I could have sold that at the jewelry party I had last week. So, having a successful consignment contract and a successful consignment experience with the store does take a lot of work, and you can't just put stuff in a store and expect them to sell, because they might just put it in the back in a box and you're just sitting on stuff that you paid for. So that was my big slap my head moment, what the heck am I doing consignment for? It was a bad idea. So from that point on, I think at that time I had one other consignment store, which maybe they would sell like one piece a month. Just didn't make sense. I pulled all my consignment. This was before I officially had my full-time business. It was probably in the early 90s. And I decided no more consignment for me. In fact, even when I was living in San Francisco and had my own store, there were a couple of really good stores that did only consignment that a couple of my friends were selling to that had great success. But even because of that, I decided I'm not going to sell to them because I don't want to have to deal with consignment. I only want people who are going to buy straight out. So it's tough, right?
It absolutely is. But you bring up a really good point that there are going to be some stores out there that do well with consignment, but it takes work. It's a partnership. And there are some great stores that have great reputations, but be wary, and it needs to work for both of you.
Exactly. So I wanted, consignment. It's coming up a lot today. And now, after the crash in 2008 and a lot of shifts in the retail and wholesale economy, a lot of stores have shifted to consignment. In fact, I think Bergdorf Goodman only sells their jewelry on consignment. So all those fine jewelers, for the most part, are putting stuff in there, thousands and thousands, sometimes probably hundreds of $1,000s worth of inventory to build a partnership with a store like Bergdorf Goodman. And in certain cases, it can be really good. So we don't want to totally slam consignment, but we want to give you like a 360 view of like what you should be thinking about when you're deciding whether or not to do consignment. So we wanted to walk you through some of the pros and cons, and then also some things to teach you or show you more how you can make a consignment relationship really successful for both parties. So why don't we start with talking about some of the pros, because we like to start with positive things first of doing consignment. So I think from just starting out designer perspective, and also, someone who's trying to get established in more retail stores, I think one of the biggest pros is that it allows a store to test your jewelry and test your product to see if it's actually going to work for them. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Robin?
Yeah, it is a great way to test your product. And it's also, and I would really encourage you, if you're working with a store and doing consignment like this, get in there and educate too. So you can test your product, but it's also great to educate their staff and get in there and be a part of it.
Absolutely. And with that being said, it's going to probably get you some exposure that you might not have otherwise gotten. So if let's say you're opening up a consignment account in a brand new region where you haven't sold before, this is an opportunity to get in front of dream clients in those other areas, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it kind of brings you to the point of, okay, well, what is selling? Maybe what's selling for their customer? What do they like? It gives you a really nice read.
A nice read on, feedback of product that's going to work, like on the retail level, from the front end consumer level, like in a store, in a case. So that also helps you shape your collection a little bit better and helps you understand maybe more of the direction that you should go into to make your jewelry more saleable. Because what we teach over here at Flourish and Thrive Academy is not how to make jewelry or how to make a bunch of stuff and then hope that it sells. We're teaching you how to build a business for those who are business minded, who want to think strategically about growing a jewelry brand. This is not just about learning how to make jewelry and then seeing what sells. This is about thinking strategically. So when you are, approaching, the possibility of doing consignment stores, this is your opportunity to see what's selling, to get direct feedback on your collection.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads into, once you're in a store and once you're doing, even if it's consignment, it can open doors to more stores too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like, let's say you had, I remember just starting out, and I'm sure that from some of the emerging brands that you've worked for, and then also being like this, sales master at Dog-Eared for so long, that it's interesting. Certain accounts are a little bit, they want to make sure that you have credibility and that you've already sold to stores so that they feel comfortable actually buying into your work. So the more stores that you sell to, that opens the door to more stores. But then like once that starts compounding, it's like the more reputable doors that you start getting into, that opens the door to other stores. So you have to think about this as a compounding effect about how it helps get you in the door of other stores and helps really build your brand name.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that I find really important is that when you go into a consignment situation, that it's a great segue to get in the door and then have a conversation and say, hey, I want to visit this in the next 3 months or 6 months, so you can negotiate wholesale to going into wholesale.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think there was one thing that we missed about building like more credibility for your business too. So, this compounding factor of getting into other doors builds credibility, and then helps like once the product is selling, because hopefully it sells because you're building a great relationship with these stores and, basically supplying inventory for them so that they don't have to pay for, is that it helps you down the road negotiate potentially a wholesale situation where they're actually buying the jewelry outright. Mm-hmm. So that's, cash flow for your business and helps you keep running it. And I think the other pro about consignment can often be is that you get a higher percentage of the split of the sale. So if you've been following us for a while, you've probably heard us talking about pricing formulas and how to price your jewelry. So when stores buy wholesale, they're buying at a wholesale price, which is not what most people think. I think a lot of designers come in and think like, oh, well, what kind of discount do I give a store? You don't give them the stores a discount. You're selling to them at a wholesale price. Now in consignment, and I think part of that perception, because I know that you've heard that a lot, right?
Yeah. I'm always surprised by that too.
That they think that way. Like, because we came from such a different background. We're like, no, it's the wholesale price that you charge them. And then what you're making on retail is usually 2.2 to 2.5% wholesale. That's a normal markup for a retail store. In most cases, I mean, there's all different variations. Sometimes people only double it. Sometimes they triple it. But I would say the average is somewhere between 2.2 to 2.5. But in a wholesale situation, like let's say you're selling something for $40 wholesale, a store would probably sell that for $100, let's just say, in their case. That's a typical markup from my experience. Like if you were selling consignment, you might have the opportunity to make $70 off of that $100 order if you negotiate the right terms with your vendors. Because I've heard of split terms, when you're doing consignment of anything like 70-30 or even 60-40. So because you're supplying the inventory, you have the opportunity to make a little bit of a higher percentage of the sale if you negotiate it right. So we get a lot of questions like, what's normal? What should I be looking for? I'm not sure if there's a norm, but this is your opportunity to negotiate. I mean, at a very minimum, you would want to do a 50-50 split. And that in those cases, I think it would have to be a really reputable store where it would make sense for you to take that low of a split. Now you have to remember that when you're doing a wholesale relationship, that's going to totally flip, and the person who is buying the jewelry wholesale is going to get the better end of the stick than you are on the retail price. Is there anything you want to add to that, Robin?
No, I think the negotiation is really important.
Really important. Now that we've talked about all these pros, let's talk about some of the cons, because I think it's important to cover that as well. So I think Robin mentioned it the best earlier when she said that when a lot of times consignment stores take it on consignment for a multitude of reasons, which we're going to walk through. But the main reason why we are not super fans of consignment or super huge fans of it is because the store is not necessarily invested in your product because they don't own it. So there's no urgency to actually sell it. There's no reason why they need to move the inventory. And so if you're thinking about it that way, it might make a lot more sense, than coming from it from I don't want to call it like a victim mentality, but like, oh, I need this mentality. Like if I get in the store, this is going to be my hope. And then you're in all this heartbreak. There's a reason why stores are doing consignment. Not all stores operate in the same way. I know that there are certain stores who do consignment so that they can carry a lot more product and actually test product, and they're willing to buy into things that are working really well. But other stores don't. And I think it's a lot more typical for gallery type stores to be the consignment stores as well. And I think, that comes from a whole different basis of the art world and the type of jewelry that it is. And it does take a little time to sell some of that stuff. So why don't you just kind of recap your feelings on that?
Well, I think you brought up some really good points that, the biggest drawback is that your inventory is in their store and you don't really have that control over it. So it puts you in this place financially that can be really challenging. But what you said is that the education level, if the drive of the store, now there are some stores that do really well with consignment and they actually sell your product, they want to know about it. But those who don't, the salespeople are not excited about it. They're not going to be pulling your product out first, they're going to be pulling out the product that they wholesale with, that they actually buy into. So there's some challenges there financially, especially for you as the designer and the person invested in all the inventory.
Yeah, and you own the inventory basically. It's your financial responsibility in your business to make sure that inventory is moving, and that's, financial toll on your business. These are, you have to think about this, like this inventory, since it's owned by you, it's on your inventory sheet, it's in your books, they have no incentive to necessarily get rid of it. So it requires, because of that, a huge management piece to make sure that you're actually keeping track of things properly and that things aren't getting stolen. I think that's another thing to think about that I didn't even have as a note here, is that, in your contract, when you're doing consignment, who's responsible if there's theft involved in your holding inventory in the store, because, that's not really your responsibility to make sure that your stuff's not getting stolen. So there has to be some sort of clause in your contract for that as well.
That is such a good point, actually.
Yeah. I know, I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, well, what if someone steals it, and they don't have a record of it and haven't gotten paid for it? So basically, to recap, there's not as high of an incentive to sell. You own the inventory, and they're not as invested in your product, because the salespeople often don't know enough about your product to actually sell it, right? And one of the favorite things that you'd like to do for wholesale accounts when you're working at Dog Yard is to really educate the staff at stores on how to sell the product and a little bit more about the product. And I feel like, I don't know if you agree, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, that if you're consigning, there's not as much of an investment to educate the salespeople.
Absolutely. I mean, it really goes back to you as the designer and really the relationship that you have with the buyer to push that, to get in there, to say, I want to make sure that your team knows me. I want to make sure they know my process. What can I do? I have, be prepared with your features and benefits, with maybe what your best sellers are, with what they're carrying, what's so special about the pieces that they're going to have, and really get to know you as a designer. So the story is really important.
The story is very, very important. Absolutely. So I think another good point that we need to talk about is that it says something about the store if they have to do consignment. It says something about their traffic, about their cash flow, about their ability to pay. I mean, not always. I'm not making this general blanket statement, but my feeling is that the reason people want to consign is because they don't have the money to actually buy the product. If that's the case, then what are they doing actually with the money, and are you going to actually get paid on time?
Ooh, that's a big one. That's a really good one, because you want to know up front what their payment process is. And as Tracy said, when she first started, how challenging it was to actually get paid. And she finally followed up with them and found out her product was sitting in the back. So make sure up front that you have in your contract, you're paid every month. We did, when I was at Dog Yard, we did have one business that we worked with that was a consignment situation. They paid us every month, and our product sold really well for them. So that was one of those unique things that it was a very reputable store, and they kind of have the pull to do that, but they paid us totally on time.
Absolutely. It has to be the right store. We're going to walk you through a few in a moment, how to make it successful. And I think the final thing, there's probably more cons to this, but these are the things that really stand out to us, is it's really hard to track your inventory and know what actually sold if they're not sending you detailed reports, or if you don't have the opportunity to go in there and take a look. Box in the backstory.
Totally.
Box in the backstory. We're just going to call it that. That's the new nickname for that story. Box in the backstory tells you a lot about how people treat and respect your jewelry when they don't own it. So it's harder to track inventory. So if you do decide to move forward with a consignment account, make sure that there's a solid system in place and reporting that's done so that you can keep track. And if someone's evasive about it and they're not doing it, pull back your inventory right away. Do not keep it in that store, because it's shady otherwise.
Well, I'm going to add one more thing to that.
All right.
Talk to the buyer and say, hey, I'll be happy to read your sales reports.
Exactly.
So do the work for them, and they'll love you even more, and you'll get paid on time.
Exactly. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about how to make this successful. So we talked about a lot about the pros and cons, and the first thing that comes top of mind to me is to make sure that you have a really solid contract with the terms of the agreement, that what you're going to get paid, how often you're going to get paid, what happens if something gets stolen, and then also how inventory is going to be tracked, and when and how fill-ins are going to be done for that inventory. And then I would also probably in there, I don't know what you think about this, Robin, have something to the effect of like, we'll do a test for 3 months and then we have the opportunity to negotiate for wholesale.
Yeah, I would say absolutely look at the 3 months, 6 months, and even a year. So year kind of maximum to do that to see if it works. The other thing I would add to that is a lot of times in consignment, people will want to switch out product.
Like sale or return?
Yeah, so that should be in your contract too, is if something's sitting there and it's been there for 3 or 6 months and it hasn't sold, what to do. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. I think that, we mentioned inventory, like you need to require them to do monthly inventory reports. And if you can, I would highly recommend that you walk into the store and do your own inventory to check up on them. I think that's good. And then I also think that there should be a way where they could send you pictures of the inventory so you can see what it looks like, especially if you design silver jewelry. It can often get tarnished in a case and it looks like crap, and that's might be another reason why it's not selling. Did you guys do that? Go and like clean up inventory and stuff for people, or how did you handle that?
There are certain stores that I would, and the store that we did consignment with was here in New York City, and I would actually go in there and straighten it up. They had a pretty good staff. It gave me an opportunity to get in front of the staff and get in front and talk about it. They got to know me. It was really great. It was to my advantage to do that, but I was constantly straightening every chance I got. So yeah, if you can get into a store, it's really important to do that. If not, talk to the associates and see if you can befriend one of them, or maybe have one be that point person. So keeping the inventory looking good and merchandised well,
yes,
is very important.
Yeah, and we were gonna talk about like filling in the case and making sure that the case is full, that the inventory looks good, that they're having enough replenishment so that it makes sense and creates a story, and it's not just a bunch of random pieces sitting there. I think the other thing is that you need to communicate often, frequently.
Yes, absolutely.
And the doors need to be open for that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It needs to be, it's not just here's my jewelry, and you don't have any communication after that. It is there. And I would even set up time frames, say, I'd love to touch base, and what's the best way to communicate? Is it by email? Is it by calling? What is going to work for you? And I'm excited about this partnership and want to make sure that the line is very successful for you. And the way you do that is communication.
All right. That is the way. Communication. Love it. All right. So I think the other thing that we want to talk about, you just mentioned educating the salespeople and keeping them informed, is that ultimately your goal at the end of the day, when you can, I think that the only stores you want to keep consignment are the ones that are really good if they're really willing not to do wholesale ever, as long as it's consistently selling for you. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is your opportunity to turn those successful consignment accounts into wholesale accounts.
Absolutely. That should be in the contract. That should be in the conversation. So it's not a surprise when you are ready to make the transition or make the change. So it should be a conversation.
Exactly. Should be a conversation, and a very good one at that. Alrighty. So wow, that was a great conversation. We've been talking about consignment so much. We haven't done a podcast about it yet, so I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that today. But I really want to hear from you guys to know if you are consigning, and we want to hear from you over at the blog. So we're going to create a special link so that you can link right to this podcast if you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher, or if you're listening on our website, you can just comment below, because we want to know from you if you're, number one, if you're doing consignment, number two, if you've had success with consignment, and if you have, we want to know what you've done to make it successful. And if you have not had success with consignment, like you've had a horror story like me with the box in the back, we want to hear about it so that we can educate all of you and our fellow Flourish and Thrivers about how they can do better, successful, or more successful consignment in the future. So pop on over to flourishthriveacademy.com Consignment. That's flourishthriveacademy.com/consignment, and tell us what you think. So remember, you're going to answer if you're doing consignment, yes or no. And then if you had a successful time doing consignment, tell us that. Or if you had a horror story, we'd love to hear that too. Well, Robin, thanks so much for being here today.
So fun to be here, and
love having you.
So great to talk about a hot topic.
I know, and I'm excited. I get to see you, and we're probably going to be together in New York around the time this podcast airs for our live event, right? And in New York City that we've put on every year for our mastermind. And I'm going to see you really soon in person and at the end of October. So I'm excited to
some trips ahead.
Record some more podcasts with you in live and in person. All right, you guys, thanks so much for listening today to Thrive by Design. We love to hear from you. So if you haven't done this yet, we'd really, really appreciate you hooking us up and giving us a little rating and review over on iTunes. You can do that by going to flourishthriveacademy.com/iTunes and give us a rating and review. Tell us what you think so that we can improve and make the show even better every week. Thanks so much for listening today, and have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hey guys, thanks again for listening today. What an awesome show to have Robin on with, right? So great. Hey, I want to ask you a little favor. If you haven't done it yet, if you have a few minutes or so, we'd love for you to pop on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/iTunes and give the show a little rating and review. Tell us what you think. Thanks so much once again for listening today. Until next time, have a good one.